What if I told you that someone close to you right now, someone who says they care, has been quietly working against you? And what if I also told you that another soul is watching over you, holding your light steady even when you can't see it? Leo, this isn't just a horoscope reading. It's a wake-up call from the universe. And no, it's not a coincidence that you're here right now. Hello, Radiant Leo. Welcome back to Eternal Mindfulness, your sacred space to realign with truth, purpose, and the cosmic blueprint of your soul. If you've been feeling a strange tug in your heart lately, like something's off, like you're caught between two emotional forces, one pulling you forward, the other draining your spirit, you're not imagining it. You're receiving signs. The question is, are you ready to understand them? Today's reading will reveal something intense. Two energies are surrounding you. One person in your life wants to see you grow, wants to water your roots and witness your rise. The other? They're cloaked in false affection. Their presence may feel familiar, even comforting at times, but deep down, something doesn't feel right. Maybe they laugh too loudly when you fall. Maybe they ask about your dreams only to quietly dismiss them. Maybe you've been ignoring that tension in your stomach, telling yourself it's nothing. But Leo, the lion doesn't apologize for sensing danger. It roars when it knows a storm is near. This video is your invitation to look past appearances and trust your higher knowing. And let me ask you this, have you been seeing repeating numbers lately? 444, 1111, 911. These are not coincidences. They are angelic codes meant to guide you to the truth, meant to bring this message directly into your path. In Buddhist wisdom, it is said that true clarity arises not from looking outward, but by stilling the mind enough to see what was always there. Today, I'm not just here to tell you what's coming, I'm here to remind you that you have the power to choose who has access to your sacred space. Now let me take a moment to thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for being here. Every like, every comment, every share, every subscription, it doesn't just support this channel, it deepens your connection to this spiritual family we're building together. Eternal Mindfulness is more than a YouTube channel. It's a gathering place for souls like yours, brave, bright, intuitive, and ready. And I promise you this, Leo, you'll want to stay until the very end of today's message. Because what the universe is about to unveil is powerful. It may explain why certain relationships have felt heavy, why you've been second-guessing your direction, or why it suddenly feels like your own light has been under attack. So now I turn to you, my fierce-hearted Leo. What brought you here today? Was it intuition? Was it restlessness? Or was it the whisper of your soul finally saying, enough, I'm ready to see clearly? Let's begin. There's something undeniably powerful about the presence of someone who doesn't try to change you, fix you, or mold you into their version of acceptable. Instead, they stand beside you like steady flame, warm, unwavering, and silently encouraging you to step into the fullness of your own light. This kind of person may not always use big words or dramatic declarations. Their love is often quiet, but it's real. And most importantly, it's expansive. You'll recognize them not by how much they demand of you, but by how free you feel around them. The person who truly wants to see you grow isn't intimidated by your power, they want to witness it unfold. They aren't threatened by your independence, they're inspired by it. In this energy, we see the symbolism of the Strength card, a reminder that true support never forces, it empowers. You're not being pushed to be stronger or more perfect. You're simply being invited to remember that the strength has always been within you. That's what love does when it's real. It doesn't shout from the sidelines. It walks beside you, quietly reflecting your own courage back to you. And when this support merges with the energy of the Ace of Wands, the result is ignited passion. You begin to feel alive again, not because someone completes you, but because they awaken what already lived inside you. This kind of connection, reflected in the King of Wands energy, is bold, magnetic, and anchored. It speaks to a person, perhaps a Leo like yourself, or another fire sign, who doesn't compete with your fire but respects it. Who doesn't try to tame you but holds space for your roar. They have their own path, their own confidence, and that's exactly why they don't need to dominate yours. Relationships like this are rare, but unmistakable. You'll know it because you won't feel small in their presence. You'll feel more yourself. And maybe this is a moment to ask yourself, do you feel safe enough to expand around the people you love? Or do you find yourself dimming, shrinking, negotiating the size of your joy just to avoid conflict? These questions are not meant to create judgment, they're meant to stir something honest. Because the journey of self-growth isn't always about climbing higher or achieving more. Sometimes, it's about recognizing where we are allowed to breathe freely, and where we are merely tolerated. In practices of self-observation, one learns to gently question, rather than force answers. You don't have to know exactly who this person is just yet. But you can start by observing who energizes you after a conversation, and who drains you, even when they're being nice. Energy doesn't lie. And neither does the body. If your chest feels lighter around someone, that's data. If you feel like you need to perform to be loved, that's data too. Golden yellow is the color that aligns with this theme, symbolizing inner authority, awareness, and self-worth. It activates the solar plexus, which governs your sense of personal power. Try wearing it or placing it near you while you journal, especially if you're exploring themes of autonomy or decision-making. Numerologically, we're also working with the vibration of number 1, a symbol of initiation, independence, and leadership. It asks you not to wait for permission to rise. It's an energy that calls you to lead your own emotional experience and become your own source of validation. Growth is not always loud. Sometimes it happens in the soft spaces, where we're allowed to be seen without performance, and held without pressure. So when someone loves you in a way that makes you more you, that's not just affection. That's alignment. And it's worth paying attention to. Sometimes the most disruptive energies don't come from strangers, but from those who once stood closest to us, people who wore the face of love, familiarity, or loyalty, only to gradually reveal a more troubling truth. You may sense this not through dramatic betrayal, but through subtle shifts, tension in the room when they enter, moments when you feel emotionally off-center around them, or a slow erosion of your self-trust that you can't quite explain. This is the energy of illusion, manipulation, and unhealthy attachment. And when these forces go unrecognized, they quietly anchor themselves in your life like shadows behind the curtain. The Moon card often shows up in readings like this, not to scare, but to alert. It reflects the presence of something hidden, distorted, or cloaked in pretense. It's the soft, deceptive light that makes familiar things seem strange, and strange things seem safe. When this card appears with the Five of Swords, we begin to see the deeper narrative of power dynamics at play, words that twist, actions that undermine, and connections that feel like battles dressed in politeness. This isn't just conflict, it's conflict with a purpose. Someone may be using confusion as a tool to make you doubt your instincts, your decisions, or your worth. And then we meet the devil, not as a supernatural force, but as a mirror to every pattern we feel trapped in. This card speaks to the hooks that keep us tethered in places we've outgrown, the emotional contracts we keep signing even when they make us suffer. It's the smile that comes with a price, the obligation that quietly drains your vitality, the fear of rocking the boat because you've been taught that keeping the peace is more important than protecting your peace. What's especially difficult about this type of energy is that it often hides behind closeness. It may be a family member who uses guilt as currency. A partner who applauds your dreams while planting seeds of doubt. A friend who listens but never truly hears you. These dynamics can confuse even the strongest among us, because we're taught to associate familiarity with safety. But safety is not the same as comfort. And comfort is not the same as care. From a wisdom-based perspective, this is where discernment becomes a form of compassion, not just for others, but for yourself. You are not required to carry what injures your spirit. You are not selfish for creating boundaries where manipulation once disguised itself as love. In fact, the ability to pause and see clearly, even when your heart feels tangled, is a higher act of presence. A form of mental clarity that comes not from rejecting others in anger, but from choosing yourself with quiet conviction. If you've been feeling chronically tired, emotionally cluttered, or spiritually foggy around someone, that is a form of data. Your body often picks up on what your mind cannot yet explain. That's not paranoia, that's perception. And perception, when honored, becomes your most trusted compass. This is the time to step back without guilt. To cleanse not just your physical space, but your energetic space. Simple rituals like salt baths, silence, or spending time in nature aren't just symbolic, they recalibrate your field. They make space for clarity to emerge. Color, too, holds influence. Avoiding ash-gray tones for now, colors that absorb and dull, can subtly protect your emotional field. Instead, choose tones that support your sense of self without overwhelming you. Think soft amber, protective reds, or warm golds that reflect empowerment rather than absorption. So ask yourself, gently but honestly, who in your life makes you question your own clarity? Who leaves you feeling small, even if they never raise their voice? And when was the last time you felt deeply safe, not just physically, but emotionally, energetically, in someone's presence? Your answers are already within you. All that remains is to trust them. There comes a point in every journey when the universe stops whispering and begins to speak with unmistakable clarity. For you, Leo, that moment may be now. When you've spent enough time doubting your instincts, questioning your own truth, and tolerating relationships or environments that drain your light, something shifts. Not out of rebellion, but out of remembrance. A quiet but powerful realization begins to surface. Your light was never meant to be dimmed to make others more comfortable. And the moment you see that clearly, you cannot unsee it. This is the energy of the sun, a revelation that doesn't arrive as a dramatic flash, but as the slow return of clarity after a long fog. When this card appears, it often marks the beginning of what many call a spiritual awakening, but more accurately, it's an inner alignment with reality. You begin to see people, patterns, and situations as they are, not as you hoped or imagined them to be. And yes, that can be painful. But it is also liberating. Because in that light, you are no longer stuck negotiating your worth, or explaining your boundaries to those who only understand control. Following that, we have judgment, not as condemnation, but as the call to rise. Not above others, but above your old self, the version of you that tolerated less, hid your power, or stayed silent to avoid conflict. This card reflects a decision point, an invitation to step forward fully, even if you don't have everything figured out. It's not about being ready in a perfect sense. It's about being willing to live from truth, even if it means walking away from the familiar. This is not a rejection of your past, but a loving release of what no longer fits. Just like how a lotus rises from the mud, untouched by it, you too can let go without resentment. And then we arrive at the magician. This is where everything changes. Not because your circumstances suddenly improve, but because your mindset does. The magician reminds us that transformation doesn't start when others give us permission. It starts the moment we believe in our ability to choose differently. The tools you need, clarity, courage, voice, action, are already within you. And once you recognize that, the external world begins to shift in response. Not overnight, but inevitably. At the heart of this shift is a simple but powerful truth. You cannot attract peace from chaos you continue to entertain. The law of attraction isn't just about positive thinking. It's about energetic honesty. When you release what is misaligned, you make space for what is meant. This is where intentional ritual can help. One practice you might consider is writing down 3 things you're ready to let go of: people, patterns, emotions, and then burning that list beneath candlelight. Not for theatrics, but as a symbolic affirmation to your subconscious: I am no longer carrying what isn't mine. Color also plays a subtle but potent role in this phase. Surrounding yourself with the color white, whether in your environment, clothing, or visualization, can support the energetic detox process. White is not just a symbol of purity, it reflects all colors, reminding you of your potential to embody anything you choose. So as you move through this shedding, ask yourself, have you been sensing the truth but hesitating to honor it? Has your intuition nudged you again and again, only to be silenced by doubt or fear? The clarity you seek is already within. What remains is the decision to trust it. And if that resonates, I invite you to say it aloud or comment below: I choose the light. Because once you choose the light, everything that doesn't align with it naturally begins to fall away. When stability begins to crack, it rarely does so all at once. It starts with subtle ripples, small moments of tension in conversations that used to feel safe, a growing discomfort around someone who was once trusted, a sense of unease that lingers even after they've left the room. These signs often get dismissed in the name of keeping the peace, especially within family structures or close-knit environments. But Leo, not all peace is true peace. Sometimes it's just silence sitting on top of suppressed truth. And when we ignore the tremors, we risk missing the moment when a quiet crack becomes a collapse. The Ten of Pentacles speaks to legacy, home, and generational connection, the kind of energy that holds both comfort and responsibility. It reminds us that stability isn't just built, it's maintained. And when that structure is threatened, whether by financial uncertainty, emotional disconnection, or manipulation from within or outside the circle, it affects not just us, but those we care for most. That's when the tower enters, not as punishment, but as revelation. It tears down what was never solid to begin with, clearing the illusion so that something real can take its place. But in the process, it can shake your foundation, and that shaking can feel like betrayal. The tower's disruption is often followed by the unsettling presence of the Seven of Swords, an archetype of secrecy, deceit, and energetic theft. This is the person who smiles with you but speaks against you. The one who pretends to protect while quietly unravels what you've built. It may be someone external, or someone too close for comfort. Either way, when their influence reaches your inner circle, especially your home or livelihood, it's no longer just an emotional issue. It becomes a matter of spiritual hygiene and energetic safety. This is not the time to be passive. Silence, in this case, is not neutrality, it becomes complicity. Speaking up doesn't always mean confrontation, but it does mean clarity. You have the right to set boundaries, to name what feels wrong, and to act in defense of your peace. Think of the mind like a home. Not everyone who knocks deserves to be let in, especially if their presence creates disarray. A peaceful home begins with internal alignment, and that starts with protecting what matters without apology. From a grounded wisdom perspective, this is also the time to be strategic. Protection isn't just emotional, it's practical. Guard your financial well-being. Keep your investments, passwords, and future plans private if someone around you doesn't feel energetically clean. Be mindful of oversharing. Not all ears that listen do so with kind intent. Awareness is not paranoia, it's responsibility. It's the art of seeing clearly without reacting fearfully. Wearing or visualizing the color deep red can support this process. Red is not just for fire and courage, it represents the root chakra, the energetic center tied to safety, security, and boundaries. Imagine it forming a protective layer around you, especially in moments where you feel vulnerable or exposed. This isn't superstition, it's embodiment. A way to ground yourself while your environment may feel unstable. And if you've been asking yourself whether you're imagining the tension or if someone is truly interfering with your peace, pause and ask your body. Do you feel calm after spending time with them? Or do you feel the need to decompress, to recover, to question yourself afterward? These reactions are more truthful than any mask someone can wear. You are not here to carry the burden of dysfunction disguised as loyalty. You are here to lead with heart, but also with wisdom. So if someone has begun to fracture the peace within your home, your family, or your future, know that it's not only okay to speak, it's necessary. And if you've reached that point of realization, take a breath and affirm it with conviction. I protect what I love. There comes a moment, often quiet but unmistakable, when the path ahead splits in two. It's not always a dramatic moment, and you may not even recognize it at first. But in your heart, you feel the pull, the subtle pressure to choose differently. To stop tolerating what weighs you down. To stop romanticizing your resilience. And to finally stop confusing endurance with alignment. This is that moment, Leo. You're standing at a crossroads, not because you've failed, but because you've outgrown. What once felt safe now feels stifling. What once seemed necessary now feels heavy. And the decision in front of you is not about right or wrong. It's about staying in a loop that drains you, or stepping toward the light that has been waiting for you all along. The Two of Wands appears when we begin to see life not as something happening to us, but something we're capable of shaping. It represents the turning point, not necessarily action, but awareness. The recognition that you've come far, and now, you're being asked to go further. This is where the Emperor energy becomes important. Not the kind of power that dominates, but the kind that anchors. This archetype calls you to stand firm in your truth, to stop looking for validation outside yourself, and to realize that personal sovereignty isn't arrogance, it's alignment. You don't need permission to make a better choice. You only need courage. And then comes the Ace of Swords, the card of mental clarity and sharp realization. This is when things become unavoidably clear. You see who you've become around certain people. You feel the cost of the silence you've kept. You realize that you've been dimming your voice not for peace, but to avoid discomfort. And the truth hits differently when you're ready. It's no longer just information. It becomes transformation. You see, when you continue to hold on to what exhausts you, whether it's a toxic relationship, a draining commitment, or a pattern that keeps repeating, you tell the universe that this is what you're willing to settle for. And the law of attraction listens. You can't manifest from a place of depletion. You can't magnetize joy while clutching what makes you feel small. Letting go doesn't mean failure, it means space. Space for what's aligned. Space for what energizes you instead of empties you. One practice that often helps in this space is writing a goodbye letter, not necessarily to send, but to speak your truth without interruption. Say what you need to say to the person or pattern that's kept you spinning. Write as though you're releasing a version of yourself you no longer want to carry. You don't need anyone else to read it. You just need your soul to witness your clarity. Because once something is named, it begins to lose its hold on you. Color can be a subtle but powerful ally here. Surrounding yourself with vibrant shades of orange, through clothing, objects, or visualization, can awaken the sacral center of action and vitality. It's the energy of movement, of motion after stillness, of reclaiming the spark that may have dulled under layers of self-denial. What's required now is not perfection, but presence. You don't have to know what the entire journey looks like. You only need to know that the first step must come from you. Not from pressure. Not from panic. But from self-respect. So ask yourself, what have you been holding on to because it's familiar, even though it no longer feels right? And what would shift if you decided, just once, to choose yourself without apology? This isn't about one decision changing your whole life overnight. It's about one decision changing how you live with yourself from this point forward. And that, Leo, changes everything. If you find yourself standing between two energies right now, one that makes you feel deeply safe, and one that keeps you spinning in anxiety, then it's time to pause. Step back, breathe, and ask yourself the question your heart already knows the answer to: who brings peace to your soul, and who brings chaos to your nervous system? Love never feels like walking on eggshells. Real connection doesn't ask you to shrink. And the people who are truly meant to be in your life won't leave you feeling unsure of your worth, or competing for clarity. Sometimes, the most radical act of self-love is not choosing who stays, but choosing not to stay where you're no longer seen. Leo, you were not born to dim your light in exchange for conditional care. You were not put on this earth to beg for appreciation or prove your worth to people who only see you when it benefits them. Your light doesn't require permission, it requires space. Space to burn, to shine, to lead. And you don't owe anyone the slow death of your spirit just to keep their comfort intact. The truth is, you've known for a while that something's been off. That someone around you has taken more than they've given. That your energy has been pulled, poked, and drained in ways you can no longer ignore. You've carried it with strength, but now it's time to carry yourself forward. The journey of choosing yourself doesn't always come with applause. It may be quiet. It may feel lonely at first. But in that silence, something powerful happens. You start to hear your own voice again. The voice that says, I deserve to be treated with consistency. The voice that whispers, I'm tired of surviving love, I want to feel safe in it. And eventually, the voice that roars, enough. I choose me. When you make that choice, not just in thought, but in action, you send a signal to the universe. You're no longer available for manipulation, for half-effort, for love that feels like performance. You become aligned with what is true, and from there, everything starts to shift. This is your invitation, not to wait for someone to recognize your value, but to live from the deep knowing that it has always been there. Right now, ask yourself gently, what have I been tolerating that my heart can no longer carry? What energy have I kept close because I was afraid of what life would look like without it? And more importantly, what would my life feel like if I surrounded myself only with what truly nourishes me? Don't rush the answer. Just notice what rises. If this video sparked something inside you, if it cracked open even the smallest space of clarity, then I invite you to honor that. Let's make it real. In the comments, drop 3 words you're ready to release: emotions, patterns, names if you need to. Let this be your symbolic start to healing. And if you're still holding on, still unsure, still quiet in your strength, know this: you are allowed to walk away without explaining yourself. You are allowed to love someone and still let them go. And you are absolutely allowed to choose your peace over their potential. Thank you for being here with me. For watching, for feeling, for allowing yourself to see what needed to be seen. Your presence on this channel means more than you know. Every like, every comment, every share and subscription connects you more deeply to the growing energy of eternal mindfulness, a place where healing meets truth, and courage becomes habit. If today's message helped bring you back to yourself, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and send it to someone you love, someone who may be dimming their own light, waiting for a sign that it's time to stop. You, Leo, are that sign. Now take that first step, not because you're angry, but because you're finally ready to be free.